Quran gives 5 different words that compose the human being. It gives the word aql, which means, it's a difficult word now because intellect means something very different to modern people than it did to pre-modern people. Because intellectus, from Latin, this idea of being able to judge between things. But in Arabic, the aql is a immaterial that moves towards intelligibles. So it's an immaterial quality of the human being that moves towards intelligible. So if I'm studying mathematics, my aql, my intellect, is moving towards these abstract entities we call numbers that are intelligibles. And then the Quran has what's called ruh, which is ruach in Hebrew. Yeah. So this is the spirit when it's directed towards the ultimate reality, which is God. And not to the intelligibles. And then the nafs is the next one. Nefesh in Hebrew also is the idea of the soul, but it's the soul when it's directed towards worldly things, the more lower things, generally. And then it talks about the body itself, that we have this body. And then it talks about the heart, qalb. So these are the
heart represents emotion?
The heart represents intellect also. The Quran says they have hearts, but they don't reason with them. And so there's this connection between the qalb and the aql. So the qalb in Arabic, the heart, comes from a word which means to oscillate between 2 opposites. So it literally can mean to be turned upside down. So the idea is that our hearts move towards good, but then sometimes they can move towards the opposite. And that's the human condition. Our lives have a mingled...
So there's a moral component to that.
There's a moral component, exactly. So the heart is related. And then there's other words, like fu'ad is another word. Very rich words. So that's the benefits that the heart gets from perceiving reality.
Okay. So if we take all 5 or 6 together as a composite, what does that imply about the nature of the person?
That we're very complex.
Okay, we're very complex.
We're very complex. And that we have a natural movement towards the good. So this is understood that the soul wants to know God. The soul was created to know God. And that's a natural movement towards good. When Aristotle says in Book 1 of the Metaphysics that all humans want to know, that is very consonant with a Muslim understanding that they want to know reality, which is God. And this is what is in our tradition is called the intellectual potential, what the scholastics call the apprehensive appetite. Apprehensive meaning quick to understand, the desire to know. And so the human being is a composite of heaven and earth. And this is why we have an angelic nature, and then we have a bestial nature. And these two are very often in this kind of antagonistic relationship. So God put the head on the top, He put the thumos, the chest, in the middle, and then He put the stomach and the genitals down below, and that's the order for an upright person to be following. So reason should govern irascibility, emotions, and appetite. When it gets turned upside down, that's the qalb. It literally means to be turned upside down. So when it gets turned upside down, the human being now is completely discombobulated. He's completely...
Now these are attributes in the sense of the expressions of what a person is, but what is the kind of the mechanism that's causing that? Because you can, from my old science and neuroscience, I can make an argument how all of those things are reflected in the brain, and that's all you need to do that. On the other hand, some people talk that you have to have an immortal soul that creates that. So those attributes they each have a different kind of character. The body that's going to obviously be physical. Emotions are one thing, and intellect is another. Nefesh and ruach. Pardon, that's my knowledge of Hebrew, not Arabic. But there's obviously great correspondence.
Sure.
And so those are slightly different categories.
Right.
And so how are they generated? What is the mechanism?
Well, there's an immaterial soul in our tradition. We believe that God breathes into the human being the nafs, the ruh, the soul, and that's what animates us. And that's why if you see a dead person, I've washed many bodies. I worked in an intensive care unit and saw many people die. There is such a extraordinary difference between an animated living human being and a corpse.
Right.
I mean, we can just see that something profoundly missing there with the loss of that breath, which in Arabic, the word for soul is related, both ruh and nafs are related to breath. And so this idea of this spirit, the Native Americans used to use the pipe to show the breath, so that they could see that it was a human and not an inanimate type of spirit. So I think the soul is, the Quran, the definitive verse about the Quran is they ask you about the soul, say the soul is from the command of God, and you've only been given a little bit of knowledge. We just don't have the knowledge. We believe in the soul, and in fact, the Raghib says, the great Persian polymath, he says that the ancients considered crazy anybody that denied the existence of the soul because it was so self-evident. And so I think the reductionist model to neuroscience, I mean, we don't know consciousness. We don't really still know what it is. We can understand the hardware, but where's the software? Where's the cloud? I mean, the pre-moderns had the idea of the agent intellect, which is kind of like the cloud, and then the intellect itself, which is the soft, the hardware. But consciousness, what is that? What is the light?
Big debate in the philosophical community, all of whom may be atheists, but they have very different views on the nature of consciousness and the requirement of something not physical in our sense of physical today that's necessary.
Right.
And the Abrahamic traditions, at least today, have an immortal soul as part of the tradition. It's less clear, some would say it's not in the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
And the Hebrew Bible talks of a resurrection as opposed to an immortal soul, but those are different kinds of debates.
If you look at the brain itself, the triune nature of the brain, I mean, we have this R stem, this reptilian brain, which is, it's this ancient survival brain. And then we have this midbrain, but on top of it is this extraordinary neocortex. And again, it's top to bottom. It's, there's an ordering there. And so the challenge, I think, for Muslims, we are challenged to use our reason to really take hold of ourselves, to discipline our souls. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that the intelligent one is the one who disciplines his soul or her soul and works for what is coming, both in this world and the next, but particularly in the next. And he said the fool is the one that lets the soul do as it pleases, do what thou wilt. The Thelema, the Abbey of Thelema, Rabelais.
Is there a distinction between the person and the self?
I think person is more in the Christian tradition. It's a very important concept because of the persons of God and obviously the human person. But even in Arabic, I've kind of looked for a corresponding word, and I don't think there is, the same idea. But the idea that each one of us is an individual and that each one of us is created by God and should have the dignity of the one created by God, that's very important.
And assuming there is some kind of an immortal soul and that comes from God, how does that happen, or when does that happen? And I'm not asking about an abortion issue, when it happens. That's irrelevant to what I'm interested in. What is relevant is it a specific act of God that picks an immortal soul for you and picked one for me, and picked one for everyone. Everyone has their special nature that God picked an immortal soul. Or is it something that's sort of part of the process of the natural creation, that a soul sort of comes with the package because of the structure of the reality that God created? So is it a sort of not mechanical thing, but the way God created things, souls come into bodies, or does God have to take an individual effort for each one on a particular basis?
So I would say that the soul, the Quran says we were created from one soul.
Okay.
Yeah. Then there's a particularization of all the souls, and they were all in the loins of that first soul. And God brought them all forth as souls. So we have been in another world. And all the souls came out, and God says to all the souls, "Am I not your Lord?" And all the souls answered in affirmative. And then we come into this world, and what we need is recollection. There's an idea that we have to remember. So the Quran is constantly telling us to remember that covenant, to go back.
Which was before our birth?
Which was before our birth. And so that's why when the child comes into the world, the very first thing that's done is the person should whisper the adhan, the call to prayer, in the ear of the child, and then give it a date on the tongue. And it's if you remember the covenant, you will have the sweetness of God's blessing.
That's a nice metaphor.
Yeah, and so that's really important.
How does that tie into an Eastern reincarnation kind of?
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a resonance there.
There's some resonance, but we don't believe in reincarnation in that way.
No, I know that.
What we do believe, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and this is very interesting from genetics. He said that every soul that comes into the world was prepared by every previous ancestor that had all the way back to its first ancestors. So they all participated into the coming in of existence of that soul. And there's a very interesting verses about how God has rakkab, which is literally to bring together in this combinatorial fashion each individual unique human being. So our genetic composition is completely unique for each human being, and that is somehow related because we believe in the
body. This is a non-physical genetics,
I think it's both. Exactly, I think it's both. And so in terms of coming in, the soul coming into the body, according to our tradition, it comes in, the vast majority of scholars say 120 days. There is a smaller minority, and I'm amongst them, that says it's around 40 days.
After conception?
After conception.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the embryology shows that now based on certain criteria.
I would be skeptical of that, but you would expect me to be skeptical of numbers and specificity like that.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me, if God created all this universe of souls, or this one soul that everything is part of, is there therefore a finite number of those that once you've apportioned that one soul into all of its pieces, you got nothing left? Or does God have to recreate something more?
Well, we believe that God's recreating it in every instant.
So there's this one big soul that God created originally that had.
It says we were created from one soul, and that's what we would call Adam. Yeah.
Okay.
Adam.
But there was a physical, some substance, non-physical substance.
It's non-physical. We wouldn't call it a substance. Yeah, it's an immaterial spirit.
It's an immaterial. Substance can be immaterial.
Yeah, that's true in the Catholic tradition.
Yeah. So it's an immaterial spirit, and then can it be cut into an infinite number of pieces, or?
I mean, I don't know. That's God's knowledge.
Don't you know everything?
I don't know. I know very little. I feel embarrassed. Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah, what do we know, really? I mean, we're all here trying to learn. Yeah.